everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland Watchlist here on the SPM Crew Podcasting Network. And this is my weekly show where my guest and I play a little bit of movie roulette and randomly select a film from my enormous movie watch list that basically has all kinds of different films, and you never know what kind of film we're going to be talking about today. And introducing my guest, Ronnoc, thank you so much for coming on.
No problem. It's a pleasure to be on.
Absolutely. And if you would like to tell people where they can find you before we hop on into the film.
Yeah, of course. I have a podcast called Tired Girl Bar Podcast. It's basically an interview-based show, and it's every new episode's every other Wednesday on the every other Wednesday, and yeah, that's basically it.
Awesome. Always love talking movies. So, and having you coming on, we're going to be talking about 1960s Murder Inc. And this is the rise and fall of a 1930s Brooklyn crime syndicate known as Murder Incorporated, led by mobster Lepke Buckhalter. And this film, giving you a little bit of background, this was released on June 28th, 1960, runs about 103 minutes, had a budget of around $750,000. This is co-directed by Burt Balaban, who's actually the cousin of actor Bob Balaban, and director Stuart Rosenberg, who would go on to direct Cool Hand Luke, starring Paul Newman. This film stars Stuart Whitman, May Britt, Henry Morgan, and most importantly, Peter Falk, who was actually nominated for Best Supporting Actor for this film. I know a lot of people probably know him more for his work in Columbo or even as the grandfather in The Princess Bride, also with some of his work with John Cassavetes. But here, starting out as a pretty ruthless mobster, this is based on a book by Burton Turkis and Sid Feder, filmed on CinemaScope, and like the synopsis said, this is set in 1930s Brooklyn. So, Ronick, what were some of your general thoughts on the film?
I liked how I do like the typical Chicago Boston Chicago type movies.
Mhm.
So it kind of like that kind of made it that kind of style. I liked how it was focused on the two people, mainly just the two people, and not just like the main, the typical family. It kind of took
Mhm.
like it showed two point of views.
Yeah, it's certainly one of those kinds of films that really captures that like urban city kind of
Yeah.
experience. And I think that's a big part of a lot of like mob movies is really understanding that environment and really fleshing that out, like that kind of street feel. And yet, for a film that's, it's billed as this fall of this crime syndicate, it really does focus on a couple of particular characters and how they fit into this. And there's a lot of that conflict between Stuart Whitman's Joey and Peter Falk's Abe. And obviously their conflict goes to some dark places, and even there's a couple of scenes in this that get really intense in terms of especially some of Falk's character's actions. One in particular in relation to Joey's wife, who played by May Britt, and kind of gets personal in a really intense way. And I was impressed by a film from like 1960 that kind of went there in terms of just how how dark of a character Abe can be in this film.
Yeah. Even though like I know assault still happens in those movies, but
Mhm.
especially when there's like especially when like the way they showed it, it's like definitely more raunchy than you'd expect for a 60s film. Like
Yeah, and especially because like this is 1960, so this is really at the turn of like the 50s, and before we get into like late 60s into 70s, where New Hollywood gets a little bit more risque and a little bit more visceral, and you know, I think it says a lot about Peter Falk's character that he's the kind of person that doesn't really care about taking what he wants. And you really get that from that opening scene because this really sets the stage that he's a dangerous guy. And
yeah.
the film starts with an act of violence and a loss of life, and really sets the stage for like, yeah, these are not good people that this film is going to be following along the way.
Yeah. Was there anything? Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted me to like follow up on?
I think they overall, I thought it was a really well put together film. It definitely had like a visceral kind of feel to it. I do feel like it kind of lost me a little bit at points when it was getting more into like, the testifying and then, dealing with the investigators. I think the film hit a lot harder for me when it was really focusing on those two main characters and their dynamic. But I do
Yeah.
think that Whitman and Falk really gave some strong performances here.
Yeah, I do agree on that. I'm glad it wasn't just me. Where at the beginning, like I thought the beginning, like first half, like around until until like maybe after the wife got assaulted. That after
Mhm.
that, I kind of lost interest. But everything else, Chef's Kiss, like I thought it was really good.
Yeah, this definitely is one of those kinds of films that feels like it has this really strong setup of these characters in this environment. And, it's the nature of the story. Like the story's supposed to be about like their downfall and stuff like that. But I just feel like how that was all told was less interesting than what happened in the earlier parts of the film. And
Yeah,
then I think the biggest takeaway from this is I'm not surprised Peter Falk got some attention here. He was definitely channeling some Brando vibes in terms of some like that raw intensity. And it's always interesting seeing like I knew I grew up watching like Columbo with my grandma and my mom and realizing it's like Peter Falk was, a much younger, more intense actor than, quirky detective who's just like, and one more thing. So, but I guess, Ronnoc, were there any other things that stood out to you about the film or anything else that you wanted to say before we wrap up our conversation?
I thought it was interesting. Like I thought that it was interesting. Like I know I mentioned that it was like not it was like just two point of views, but I liked how you could even like see like where the guy, even when they left the like the mob guy alone, like
Mhm.
he went to prison. I like how you could they brought him back at least for that little snippet to see where he's at in the very end, just like just to see like where he's at and what's like what like his life is that he's in prison and everything.
Well, and I think that's an important thing to show here too. And because there's a lot of mobster films that you don't really some of a lot of those mobsters don't make it to prison. Um, uh, they wind up dying, having a much more violent end to their situations. But it is
He made
interesting
it
when they
pretty
do.
good.
Yeah, it's like it's interesting when they show that like yeah, these are the consequences of your actions, and this is the kind of lifestyle that you expect. I don't know if you've seen The Irishman from Martin Scorsese, but I feel like that's a film that really captures it's like, yeah, you're gonna probably if you get old being a mobster, you're probably gonna have a really sad life at the end, very isolated from people and not really having a whole lot to latch on to.
Yeah, and I could and like you said, Columbo definitely has one of like I like you could kind of see like maybe it's not like maybe it's a new point of view, but uh, like you see it's Columbo's point of view, but you definitely see the like the other point of views instead of just like the usual point of view of the like of the detective, but you can
Yeah.
see others like you know yeah, I know I said this like twice, but still it's really important.
Exactly. And I think the last thing that I want to bring up too is like this is a really good looking, like crisp black and white shot film. And I think that goes a long way in terms of giving it that like gritty noirish kind of feel for like a mobster movie and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So overall is like definitely has the atmosphere, has some good performances, and at least especially the first half of the film really delivered. And it still has its moments throughout, but this is a film I hadn't heard of before, and wound up on my watch list because I wound up putting basically every film that's been nominated for an Oscar on there. So it's cool to see some of those performances in action that got that kind of recognition. But Ronnoc, thank you so much for coming on and, hopping in and watching Murder Inc. with me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me to come on.
Absolutely. And hopefully, all of you had enough there to go check out this film. And thank you for listening. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode. Let us know what are your favorite kind of crime thriller or like old school mobster kind of movies. Also, make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. The SPM Crew Podcasting Network is ever expanding with brand new shows coming out over the next few weeks or so, and always looking for guests to come on to a variety of different shows talking about movies and television, music, sports, and all kinds of other niche topics as well. And if you like our logo, make sure to go check out High Flyer Creative. They do a lot of great work, and you can lean on them for any kind of digital marketing needs you might have. But most importantly, thank you as always for tuning in and supporting the Wasteland Watchlist here on the SPM Crew Podcasting Network.